Known as the father of India's space program, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai's interests included space and nuclear energy, architecture, industry and business, institution building, management development, art, music, and theatre. He was a scientist and entrepreneur, an educator, and a businessman. When he passed away unexpectedly at the young age of 52, he left behind a legacy few can match, having set up internationally reputed institutions and organizations that have made India proud and put us on the world map. In this BIC session, Dr. Padmanabh Joshi, who heads the Vikram Sarabhai Archives at the Nehru Foundation for Development, Ahmedabad, and author and publisher Divya Arora, discuss the towering personality of Dr. Sarabhai and share various anecdotes from Dr. Joshi's personal interaction with him as a young man and bits of information to piece together a wholly fuller image of the person. They have jointly authored the book Vikram Sarabhai, India's Space Pioneer, an illustrated biography for Dr. Sarabhai's birth centenary in 2019, which is testament to their mutual admiration and love for Dr. Sarabhai and his work.
Thank you, Lekha. Thank you very much. Dr. Joshi and I are delighted to be here at the Bangalore International Center, talking to the members of the center about Vikram Sarabhai on his birth anniversary. Most of us know Vikram Sarabhai as India's space pioneer. But what most people don't know is that here was a man who lived a short life in which he achieved a lot. Here was a young mind with great vision and great wisdom, based on strong foundation of values, and most importantly, with India and its progress in mind. And he lived a very interesting life too, which we will discuss with Dr. Joshi today, who has been heading the Vikram Sarabhai Archives for a long while now. So, Dr. Joshi, if I may begin, what was it like to meet Dr. Sarabhai for the first time?
Yeah. Divya, you are taking me to about 50 years old story. The most happiest moment of my life, I would say. It was in 1966 when I had just completed my graduation in economics and joined the Gujarat University for my post-graduation course in political science. And at that time, at the end of the year, I was told that an institution called Nehru Foundation for Development in Ahmedabad wanted to do a socio-economic survey of few villages in Gujarat state. And our director had recommended my name also for doing that research study. So there was about 15, 20 students from all over the Ahmedabad, from various colleges as well as institutions, to do that study. So we had gone there, did the complete work. We met so many villagers, talked to them about their socio-economic life, and when we returned, and I went to the institution's office to deliver all the data. At that time, I asked that who is doing this study and what is the purpose and what is the objective of the study. So I was told that it was Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. And I was very much surprised. I said, he is the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission, and you are asking me to do the socio-economic survey of Gujarat villages. What is this? So I said I wanted to meet him. And they say he is in Bombay, but he comes to Ahmedabad Saturday, Sunday to help and guide his students at Physical Research Laboratory. So on one of the Saturdays, I went to the PRL and I went to see his secretary and asked him that I would like to meet Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. As usual, the secretary said, no, you can't meet him. You have to write a letter to us. What is the objective of your meeting? Why you want to meet him? And only then we will inform you. While we were talking, suddenly Dr. Vikram Sarabhai enters the room. And he asked his secretary, yeah, what is going on? So his secretary said, sir, that student has come and you would like to meet him. He said, okay, send him. And I could not believe it. One khadda, chabba and pajama. And he just took me inside. And it was a very simple office, small table. There was only ceiling fan, no AC or anything. And he was just sitting. He said, tell me what it is. I was very surprised. I could not believe that what was going on. And I said, sir, I had actually just now attended one of the socioeconomic study of Nehru Foundation for Development. And he was so happy. No, tell me something about it. How was that study? How was the people's response? Where did you go? And for 15 minutes, he talked to me and asked me so many questions. And then he said, oh, I'm sorry, actually, you wanted to ask me and I started asking you. Tell me what it is. Sir, I just wanted to know that since the socio-economic survey of that villages and you are the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission, it was very difficult for me to understand this relationship. So he was just laughing. And then he told me, look at, I am also looking after the Indian space program. And we are trying to use satellite for education as well as the people's welfare and benefits. And then when he started talking about satellite, I was surprised. I said, what is satellite? That was the first time I heard the name. He said, yes, I know that you did not understand what I meant that. And then he told me, he said, look, take a small piece of mirror, put it in the ceiling and put the torch light. What will happen? I said, the light will reflect. He said, okay, you understand what is satellite. He said, what it is? He said, we are going to put our satellite at 36,000 kilometers above the sky. And then we will be using both audio as well as video program, and that will cover the whole country. And that is how we would like to use satellite for rural development. And what you did it in the villages, you knew what are the problems the villagers people are facing, what are their requirements, and what is their life. So based on that information, we are going to use our satellite program. I'm happy that you came to meet me. And please do come again also, because my son is also studying at MIT in political science. And then you can also meet him and we will have a nice time together. And please come and meet me sometimes. It will be my pleasure. I could not believe it that here is the man is talking to me. And when he looked at me, the brightness and the sharpness of his eyes, oh my God, still even I realized that I could not believe it, because that eyes light reached up to my heart rather than on my face.
I think that must have been a life-changing moment, because after that you did a PhD on him and your whole life has been dedicated to Dr. Sarabhai. But sir, yeah. I hear this all the time that whoever met him, he had such an impact on people. And so many scientists were born or made during that time. So much industry, so many institutions were set up. Everyone was so motivated. It seems like a very charged time. What do you think? What was it? It was just, can you tell us a little about his vision that everyone was so motivated?
I think, Divya, that first meeting, the kind of, it was like he was a person like with down to earth kind of personality. And I never thought, let me tell you very frankly, well, this is not the right time to say, but I would tell you, I really realized that he was the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission only after his death. When he was not there, I realized that thing. Because otherwise he was like a family member kind of thing. And whoever used to meet him, the way they used to feel as if he belongs to him only. Now, this is the kind of thing. And this is not only my experience. I met quite a few students and his friends. They also told me the same thing, that meeting him, that changes your life like anything. The motivation, the support, the guidance, everything you get it in your first meeting. And then you rely on him so much. For everything you want, you will go to him. And he will be very happy to be always with you. That was the kind of personality that he had. And
so it was, I think it was his power to delegate. He saw if you can do something, then he'd let you do it. You know, so scientists, I think, were allowed to follow their dream, make mistakes. And he with that, I think there was also this delegation, accountability, and responsibility came together for Dr. Sarabhai. I think that's why he could do so much. Do you want to talk about his way of functioning?
Divya, I remember few of the scientists at the Thumba Curator and Rocket Launching Station. At that time, a group of scientists just asked me casually, sir, what is your philosophy of giving power to your colleagues and was working with you? So his immediate reply was, no, I don't believe in giving power to anybody. And everybody was surprised. Sir, without power, how can we do all this work? Then he was just with a smile, he said, when I give you a responsibility, that responsibility contains the power also with it. You know, you can just imagine the way of his life working. And it was very casual kind of thing, and you become a part of his life almost like that. This is way how he used to, and that is what people felt also like that. It is not one person's experience.
Yeah, but sir, he came back from Cambridge, and then he said he came back with a dream to set up the physical science laboratory, which was his baby. And then, of course, I remember that when he came back, he had no knowledge of textiles, and yet he was asked to set up the Ahmedabad Textile Millowners Association to help them. So, Atira was set up, and then PRL was set up, and then AMA was set up, and then IIM was set up, and then side by side he was setting up industry. It was chemicals, it was pharmaceuticals, it was space. So, sir, I'm just imagining a world where it was Ahmedabad, Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, all these institutions, the family business, industry. So, 24 hours of a day, that time, no mobile phones, no internet. How did Vikram Sarabhai manage to pack in all this and run it in 24 hours? Like, what were 24 hours in the day of his life?
Yeah. They are very interesting question that you have raised actually. And that was my question to him also at one point of time. And I asked him, I said, atomic energy, space, electronics, PRL, Thumba, Delhi, what is this and how can you manage? And he was just laughing at me. I said, but how can you manage? Is it not a kind of mental strain on you? He said, when I go from atomic energy to space, that is my relaxation. I was surprised. He said, I'm so happy doing that. And while talking to space, he will go to the next room. I said, where was he going? He said, there is an electronics committee meeting going on. So he would attend then and he will come and join space meeting. So this is the way how he's working. So once I was telling him, I said, anyway, this is your relaxation, but your body also needs some kind of rest. How you manage that part of time? And with a smile on his face, he just went inside and returned with a small rubber band in his hand. He said, this is your 24 hours. And then he straight that rubber band and told me, this is my 24 hours. My God, I could not believe it. You know, he would get up in the morning at 5 o'clock and he will go to sleep at 2 o'clock at night. After coming from PRL, he will go back to his room and start reading his students' PhD thesis chapters. When he is going to Bombay, he will go specially by train so that he can take few students with him from Ahmedabad to Baroda and resolve his thesis issues and everything. Those people will get down at Baroda and go back. Actually, I would tell you in that 18 or 19 hours working hours, he had no time to talk to anybody. Really, I'm telling you, the way he was working. And I still remember once his mother also told him that, Vikram, I think you require some kind of rest. This is not the way you will work like this. But he had no time to listen to this kind of thing because he had so many things like and miles to go before I sleep, what Robert Frost said, say. And this is what I think he was following, Divya.
Fantastic, sir, fantastic. But sir, this was it was a mind that approached everything differently. He was thinking out of the box all the time on everything. I remember when he came back from Cambridge and Kasturbai Lalbhai asked him that, you know, let's modernize the textile industry in Ahmedabad. Why don't you look at what's happening in the West, come up with better systems, better management systems for the association, and let's see how we can better our industry. And he knew nothing about textiles, but yet Lalbhai proposed, and the Ahmedabad Textile Industries Association was set up. And of course, Dr. Sarabhai was the honorary director. But here, when the minute he became director, I remember this very interesting story where Dr. Sarabhai had to hire faculty for Atira. Instead of hiring people with experience, he placed an advertisement saying candidates with previous experience need not apply. Most unusual for its style, but Dr. Sarabhai hired 4 scientists with knowledge of scientific methodology to work on modernizing the textile industry with no prior knowledge of textiles. I mean, that really speaks for him. But then, sir, I understood that everything was to be fresh. Everything had to come out, you know, in a different manner. And then once Atira was up, of course, it needed finances, and he didn't want to go to the government. So again, he thought out of the box. He asked all the mill owners to send in the number of spindles they had in their mill. And then he would decide the amount depending on the spindles. So that's very interesting. And I remember that story where his father said no. So you know, I'm not going to pay because he was the owner of Calico Mills. And he was asked, why won't you pay? He said, look, if you're doing something, you better do it nicely. So why don't you have a labor welfare department as well? And then I remember that labor welfare, which is such a wonderful thing to integrate then, sir. So I think it was also, I mean, he thought out of the box. Yes, he had great education, but sir, the parents, the upbringing, the homeschooling, I mean, they were known as the Roosevelts, right? They got the best teachers from across the world to homeschool the kids. And I think that kind of openness of thinking and seeing the world's view rather than a very singular sort of viewpoint on anything, that helped them as a family to, you know, grow, as well as for him to see things differently. I remember that we'd had this conversation because it wasn't just about him. Even his family was like that. Because much before, I think it was around 1918, there was an episode when the Ahmedabad textile laborers went on strike as they wanted their wages increased. Ambalal, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai's father, Ambalal Sarabhai, was the president of the Ahmedabad Mill Owners Association. Yeah. And his sister Anusuya Sarabhai was the founder and the president of the Ahmedabad Textile Labor Association.
Yeah.
During the strike, even though they lived together in one house, ate together at one table, they did not let their differences come between them. Each day, his sister would leave the house in the same car as her brother, and at the gate of Calico Mills, she would get off and join the labor in their demonstrations. And each evening, when her brother drove out of the mill, she would return home in the same car. Even the labor force never doubted her devotion to their cause, as they had full faith in her. The strike was ultimately resolved amicably after Mahatma Gandhi's intervention. Historically, this was the first time Gandhiji used fasting as a weapon for change. Yeah. But sir, coming back to Dr. Sarabhai, everything couldn't always be going well. There must have been mistakes, there must have been blunders. How did he react to mistakes? You know, there must have been crisis at some point. So how did he deal with that?
Yeah, I think after he passed away, we were all colleagues and friends and his family members. We all thought that we always talking so much good about him, but what was his weakness? Let us think about it. And the only common statement from each and everybody, whether it is students, his colleagues, or his friends, or his family members, they say he didn't know how to say no to anybody. He was never angry with anybody. Quite a few percent. I remember once he was going from PRL to airport, and he asked just driver, "How are you and how is your family?" And the man did not answer properly. So he immediately asked him, what is the problem? So he had some finance problem. He said, I had already inquired, but the accountant says, no, it will not be possible. It will take some time. He said, you bring the car back to PRS. Call the accountant. And the accountant came. He said, please see that his application is done and hand over the money today by evening, 5 o'clock. He said, but this is not possible. He said, you take a check from me, but see that it is done. And it was done. It was impossible for anybody would ever ask him for anything. It will be done before somebody is asking it. And that is why it is said that even after his death, it was not only the people who worked for him only, but the family members of those people. They also felt and they missed Vikram Bhai so much because of his love, his kindness, and their guidance for everything. That was the type of man he was.
It is not accidental that on the soil of India, the great space powers, the United States, the USSR, and France, are collaborating with us at the equatorial range near Tumba. And even the United Nations sponsorship of this range is not merely a matter of form, but constitutes an umbrella under which, regardless of political differences, nations can collaborate in the peaceful uses of outer space. In my opinion, the aspect of space research which I would like to stress most is in relation to the national capability, the self-confidence that this will generate. And if I were to give my own evaluation of this, I think the benefits of these far outweigh all the rest that we have been talking about.
So here, there was space, education, business, industry, management, education, development, remote sensing, of course, music and theater, because also the arts he set up with Arpana. So I can go on and on, sir, but also he was also our face abroad. He was very close to Indira Gandhi. She was just a phone call away. She shared his vision, and that's why we were able to set up so much of what we have set up. And look at us today. Would you want to talk about that, about Vikram Sarabhai and how he handled international relations? And
when, after Dr. Homi Bhabha's untimely death, he was asked to take over the Atomic Energy Commission. And at that time, one of the most important issues we were not only as a chairman, but as the country was facing, was to sign a test ban treaty, which all the Western countries who had the bomb wanted India to sign it. Now, the thing was going on, and Vikram Bhai said, no, there is the only one way we can do that thing. If all the countries who have this thing, they should agree to protect those who don't have in case of any nuclear attack. If they agree to that, then we are ready to sign. And Mrs. Gandhi said, yeah, this is a good idea. So what do you want? He said, please give us a letter to all the 5 countries, America, Russia, France, Germany, Britain, everybody. And we will go there, we will meet the head of the state like President Johnson, then Russian Prime Minister, and the French President and British Prime Minister. And we will discuss with them. And if they agree, we don't have a problem. And he took the letter from them, and he and Mr. L.K. Jha, who was Prime Minister's secretary also, they both worked together, and they went and they met all these head of the states and discussed with them. But the only thing was that Russia said that if US agree, then we have no problem, we will do it. So it was more that Cold War came in the way, which really disturbed the whole idea. But I tell you, even if, because she had so much trust on him, that during the Bangladesh war, I remember once the president of USA sent his Secretary of State
Kissinger
to meet the Indian Prime Minister. And it was a unscheduled meeting, and he just came to meet, and Prime Minister said, no, I don't want to meet them in this way. So he asked Dr. Vikram Sarabhai that you go and discuss the issue. Now, I don't think any scientist would have been ever asked to do such kind of diplomatic things. And another very interesting thing, you know, when he started Indian space program, the first thing he started was Thumba Equatorial Rocket Launching Station. And that station was dedicated to United Nations, in which all the countries of the world can come and use the facility and do their rocket launching programs. So by that way, each and every program had kind of internationally that let all the people get the benefits of this kind of our projects. That was the way he used to work.
So, sir, in one sense, then we can also say that he was a scientist, but also a diplomat. He wore so many hats. He was 28 in 1947 when he began his career as a scientist. And he passed away so suddenly in 19. In fact, now you've almost you've dedicated your life to Vikram Sarabhai. But sir, this was the nature of the man. Anybody he met, he inspired. So many scientists were born. So many thinkers were born. So many visionaries were born. Everybody went out and did such great things under him. But sir, I remember seeing a photo in your archives. It's a regular photo of just Vikram Sarabhai talking to scientists in the laboratory. And then when I understood the essence of the photograph, I realized that it had to be a double spread in the book, because he's looking very interestingly, and he's focused on listening to a very young gentleman next to him. That gentleman is a very young APJ Abdul Kalam.
Yes.
So for me, just to give young scientists that space to grow, to talk, to learn, to fail, and we all know.
Yeah, you look at the way he looked at him. Everybody is listening to him. It was not the listening or anything. He just was accepting the trust that he had given to that man. Yeah. And that trust was being returned. And that is the exact understanding or the meaning of that photograph, how I looked at it. Now, I can give you a very interesting example when you are talking about this thing. About Dr. Kalam only, that when, at that time, Vikram Sarabhai, along with the senior scientists, used to come to SSTC for the review of each and every project to every department. So on that day, there was a review of Dr. Kalam's SLV project department. So in the morning, they started reviewing each and every individual working there. So everybody used to present what he was doing and what he had done. So after doing everything, the presentation was over. One senior scientist who came along with Vikram Sarabhai, he got up and said, Dr. Kalam, now all this work was done by your colleagues or your people working under you, then what you are doing? So Kalam was just getting up, and then Vikram Sarabhai said, no, Kalam, you sit down. I want to answer that question. And he got up and told, all these people have done this thing and accomplished all this work. It is because of Kalam's guidance and support. And then Kalam wrote in his autobiography, I considered Vikram Sarabhai as Mahatma Gandhi of Indian science. That was Vikram Sarabhai.
He was 28 in 1947 when he began his career as a scientist. And he passed away so suddenly in 1971 when he was 53. That's a career spanning 24 years in which he has set up more than 35 institutions of international caliber in the fields of space, education, industry, business, management of business, management of institutions, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, remote sensing, and let's not forget performing arts. In my mind, what fascinates me about Sarabhai is this vast horizontal canvas in which we see his indelible footprint. And then in each subject or field, we can see his piercing gaze through it to develop the subject so that it benefited India decades later. And all this was due to his leadership skills and his magnetic persona. We discussed his manner of delegation and accountability, of the way he the way he actually embraced experimentation and accepted failure, of motivation and positivity, simplicity and humility, of being connected deeply within oneself and with nature and the outside world, and at the same time in harmony and with vision of the larger purpose of getting things done, and that too in record time. Everyone who met him or spoke to him has written about, has spoken about his charm, humor, wit. He was down to earth and approachable. I think, sir, if all our aspiring scientists, engineers, everyone was working in all the fields that were so close to him, and all of us, I think, if all of us can learn from these kind of leadership lessons and take lessons from Vikram Sarabhai, I think it will all take us very far in terms of imbuing and pursuing what he set out to do. So his ideals today, if the younger generation can imbibe, there's a lot to learn from the life and times of Vikram Sarabhai.
Yes, we set this up because about 5 years ago we realized that this was going to be one of the most important peaceful applications of outer space and would have a profound influence on future development of communications and mass communications in this country.
Communication and mass communication.
That's
that
right.
means telephone and television.
Yes, very much so. Particularly in a country like India where the large mass of people who have to be motivated are illiterate. It is very important to, I think, have the information input as an integral part of the developmental process. And I think a powerful technique like a audiovisual presentation through television can be one of the most important motivations, a catalyst for action. India has 500,000 villages, and if we want to really create the counter forces to urbanization, which everybody agrees has its own great problems, if we want to see that some of our best people continue and can have a meaningful, qualitatively rich experience, even if they are in villages, then we can use these new techniques to bridge that information gap, that contact with the wider sphere in the world.
Dr. Joshi, Vikram Sarabhai was very clear that the entire space program for India had to be focused on development. He constantly spoke about empowering farmers, empowering the villages with information about seeds, about the weather. And I remember till the very end, sir, you will also know, everyone who's read about Sarabhai will know, he was very strongly against development for nuclear development, to use nuclear technology for defense and war. He stood against that. Worldwide, he was a loud voice for peace. And so if it was just about space and development in his mind, and of course, I remember he was ridiculed a lot, saying, oh, you're coming from India. What is India talking about satellites? Why is India talking about space? But he still saw that as leapfrogging years ahead and decades ahead for India by using that technology. And I remember him then talking to a French television about satellites and talking about saying, we are sitting in different countries and we have all this knowledge, we need to integrate it. And he meant actually the internet. And, this is what we have today. So, sir, now it's a very interesting point about, we've just had Jeff Bezos go to space and we've just had, 2 space missions in the last few days. What do you think about this? What would Dr. Sarabhai have said to this?
In 1957, when Russia first time launched the Sputnik successfully, and that was the beginning of the space program in the world, and all the countries, especially the developing countries, they started almost like a competition to first who should do the first this kind of thing was going on. At that time, when Sarabhai had already started working on the IGY called Indian Geophysical Year program, which ultimately led to the space kind of program. And we were passing through that situation at that time. Both Homi and Baba and Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, they thought that, yes, this is our most important program for us. And if you don't do today, then tomorrow you will have to rely on other countries. So you must start it, but at a very lower level. our priority would be absolutely, as you rightly said, space for development. No fantasy of going to moon or space tour or anything. He said, our main purpose is to help my farmers, my villagers for education, the schools, the family planning program in the country, the animal husbandry program, all these kind of development programs should be benefited. And that is why the beginning was made with SITE, Satellite Instructional Television Experiment. With American satellite, we used it for 1 year and we started this program. Though it was unfortunate that before the program was really started, executed, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai passed away. But it was done according to only his wish and his dream. And then Professor Dhawan took over this thing. But he all the time talked about this. We should always go for the latest technology. American always used to say that you should go step by step. Vikram Sarabhai said, no, why when the satellite technology is there, why should I go to the other things for going to the satellite, to space and to use the communication? Huh? So he said all the time, you go to the latest one and we should do it and we should see it. Now, for example, when our program was getting done at that time, the one decision was there that we will have our own launch vehicle because we are not going to rely on other countries. And our scientists and engineers were sent to NASA and France and Russia for the training. After they returned, they were discussing, they presented their own, that this is what they are doing and this is how they do it. So Sarabhai said that now we have to decide according to our requirement. America is doing with 3-stage launch vehicle. We would like to do it with the 4-stage vehicle. Now, before taking that decision, he called the whole group members of the satellite launch vehicle group. And in every individual, he asked that, tell me, are we going for the 4 or 3-stage rocket? And you convince me why we should go for that kind of thing. Like that, he gave this work to about 10 persons. And every individual felt that I was given this work because I'm close to Vikram Sarabhai. And finally, everyone's opinions were collected, and based on that thing, the decision was taken. So he all the time believed in horizontal control kind of situation, whether it was a space, atomic energy, management, industry, or education, or any institution. He said all the works are based on the creativity and the scientific research. At that time, you cannot work about the vertical control and put all the kind of controls on the people working on that. So forget that thing, let them work accordingly, and then you will get the best kind of this thing. This is how he used to work, and that was his style of working. You know, the people have tried to misunderstand his concept, what he said, that we are not interested in going to moon or space and everything. At that time, when our Indian space program started, at that time, our priorities were different. He always talked about the latest technology for everything. The cryogenic engine type of issue, which was a very important issue, and both America and Russia were not ready to really help us with that thing. And he immediately asked our engineers, okay, we start it, doing our own. And we started doing it. So what it would have been see, I can tell you very interesting, which will also answer your question. In 1964, there was a Pugwash conference. You know, Pugwash conference was started, Pugwash continuing committee was started by Lord Bertrand Russell for disarmament in the world. And all the scientists of the world were the members of that thing. And he also started Indian Pugwash. At that time, in 1964, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai had presented a paper, Demilitarization of Space. You can imagine in 64 talking about demilitarization space, which is the today's issue that government, all the government and United Nations is discussing. He said that when with so many satellites will be put in the orbit, and when all this space become a throwaway kind of material, at that time, what will you do? Because then there will be no space. Today, we don't have now space to put our own. They have given us the orbit that this many satellites you can put in the orbit. You cannot have more than that. That has been decided by the International Communication and Satellite Committee. So, demilitarization of space, it also gives us the answer that at that time also Vikram Sarabhai thought that this is going to be a real major issue. And at that time, people will start thinking about, let us use space for our nuclear waste, where to throw all these things. And that is why what I suggest that no, it was never like that. He was against that thing. But at that time, our priority was different. We had our agriculture, food problem. We used to import food and everything from outside, from Western countries and everything. But at the time when everything was okay, we had to go for this thing. So I don't think that it was that against what we are doing is against his mission.
So he'd be gladly going up on the mission.
Yeah.
You've probably gone up first.
See, let me tell you, if you study the development in the Indian space program from the beginning till he died, the type of programs that he had initiated, like remote sensing, was a very new kind of program.
Yeah.
And when he was appointed as the first scientific chairman of the UN Conference on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space at Vienna in 1968, at that time, all the countries of the world had put their own programs in terms of exhibitions there. And at that time, Vikram Sarabhai saw when that remote sensing, he immediately called Professor Pisarotti. Pisarotti, take up this program. This is what our requirement is there. And immediately, Pisarotti said, Dr. Sarabhai, it will be a very expensive program. He said, you don't worry, I will manage for you. But you start, this is our priority. That is what we need in our country for our farmers, because our country is 100% based on the agriculture. So according to the priority, he always wished that we must go for this kind of program. And you know how he started this remote sensing program, where it is an interesting story, but he just made the project proposal and asked the Prime Minister that I would like to present before you this new program. So she said, Vikram, we are all busy, the election is going on, and I go in the afternoon and return early morning. So let the election will be over, only then we'll be able to meet. She said, no, this is a very important program. We must meet it. And finally, she agreed to meet him at 2 o'clock early morning. And he presented the complete remote sensing program project proposal up to 3 o'clock in the morning and got it approved. So for him, the latest technology, accepting new programs were very, very important, but it should be the beneficial to the people, to the country. That was the main thing.
He proposed that we use this new technology of mass communications for broadly educational and developmental purposes for specially directed areas of our country.
You know, Ravi Mathai, who was at the very young age, was selected by Vikram Sarabhai as the director of IIM, the first management institution in Ahmedabad. And with that, Ravi had seen him in such a way that the way he developed the institution in such a way that he felt so much about him. And the way he has given the tribute, I think that is the most, I would say, very, it is full of sorrow or pain and also kind of great respect to that departed soul. Why don't you just share that?
Sure, sir. There are many such as I who agreed to work in Ahmedabad because we believed in the honesty and worth of Vikram's ideas. There are three attributes which set men apart from animals. And it is the apportionment and degree of these attributes that in a man separate the lesser from the great. They are the mind, the heart, and the soul. If in these attributes lies the measure of greatness, then Vikram was great. His mind was great. He could see far, and in all that he did, he had a vision for the future. He spoke in Delhi a few months ago to a large gathering of managers. He spoke of the vast change that could be brought about in the daily lives of our people by the peaceful use of atomic energy and space technology. He was concerned with raising standards of living and bringing people closer together through understanding. He had a broad mind. He was a physical scientist, but the physical sciences could not contain him. His vision demanded the total use of knowledge that blended disciplines of many fields to accomplish changes which no single discipline can encompass. The institutions he founded and nurtured reflected this. His thesis at the convocation of the Indian Institute of Management, which he addressed as the founder of the institute, was that the whole was greater than the sum of the parts. Though all of us were involved with him, his was the vision of the whole, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. As he was concerned with the future, he was concerned with the problems of the present. He was concerned with translating today's knowledge into goods and services which could enter our lives, and so from the Atomic Energy Commission, he spun off enterprises to accomplish this. He was concerned with how organizations will and can change with their environment. Vikram's was a great mind. We cannot measure the length, breadth, or depth of his vision. He had a great heart. He could talk with governments, he could build institutions, but he could concern himself with the problems of the individual. His heart was big because he gave and asked nothing for himself in return. Those who met him were better for meeting him when he was concerned about them. He had the patience and the rare gift of listening to understand. A great mind can be cold, but his was warm. He had a beautiful soul because he saw the good in others. The trust he gave was trust returned, and we felt cleansed by having worked for him. In Trivandrum, he lay down his heavy burden. He lay down to sleep, but died. And in death, he lives in us. The greatness of the man, great of mind, great of heart, and great of soul. It could be said of Vikram, in the words of the Old Testament, "Judge me, O Lord, for I have walked mine in dignity." The poet Landor wondered, "I see, I know not why, thorns live and roses die."